Okay, let's go ahead and get started on our next project. This one is modeled after the work of Kandinsky. Now, we're going to be focusing on the use of shape and variety with your artwork. Now, if you remember correctly, a shape is a line that goes from point A, around a space, and back up to point A. The fact that it goes around the space is what creates your shape. Now we already covered that from the last 6 weeks, but I wanted to go ahead and go back over it. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is texture. Texture is the use of your artwork to create the idea of how something feels. Now if we look at this little guy, he's clearly very soft and very fluffy. Poor little guy's missing an eye. Now, he's very fluffy, but you can't actually reach out and touch him because he's on your screen. The fact that he's on the screen, but you can see the different in texture between him and this little guy is how you're going to change how you're going to be doing the textures in your artwork. So if you were trying to draw him, if you were trying to draw this guy, you'd be wanting to have a lot of reflections. As you can see on his forehead, you have these nice bright lights where the ceiling lights are hitting him. Now, on this guy, you can see how you would have to include some sort of stippling or hatching in order to create the look of this fluffy texture. Now, with your artwork itself, we're going to be using what's called texture plates. Texture plates are different materials that have a specific texture already attached to them. Now, with these texture plates, you want to make sure that you're being nice and gentle with them because you don't want to actually damage the texture plate. But when you're doing your artwork, you can use any sort of texture that you'd like. So for example, if you want to use the bottom of somebody's shoe or something like that, you could end up with maybe a tire tread like so on your paper. Now, the final product that you're wanting to look at, you're going to want to start by drawing a series of shapes. It doesn't matter which shapes you do. You could do triangles, or squares, circles, stars, hearts, or even an organic shape, for example. What shape you choose is up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and continue working on a piece that I've already started. Now in this piece, I already have an assortment of shapes drawn out. As you can see, I have smaller shapes, larger shapes, and we're going to focus on these overlapping shapes. Now if you notice, I already have a red one and I have a yellow. So this one I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color it in blue using a different texture. So you can see how I get the different textures onto my paper. Now, when I do my drawing, I'm going to make sure that I choose the color blue. And the reason I'm choosing it specifically is because this one's yellow and this one's red, and I want the areas that overlap to go with a secondary color. So the main shape should be primary. The small overlap should be secondary. It creates the idea of something more transparent. Now I'm going to go ahead and use this little grid to be my texture for the circle. You'll see that it's a little bit bigger than the circle, but it's also at the same time a little bit smaller. So it overlaps over here, but it's too small over here. Now this is fine so long as I'm going to be using it on only one or two of these sections. So as you can see, it covers most of these, so it should be okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and place it underneath, make sure that it's lined up using my finger to press down on the paper to make sure that it's lined up with the edge of the circle. I know that the circle ends here and starts here, so I'm going to scooch it just a little bit over to the side just to try to make sure that I get this circle as well, this section of this circle as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start coloring. Now notice I made a mistake right here. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that in a minute. I chose to do that little mistake specifically so you can see ways that we can fix it. Now, when you're shading, if you do it quickly, and press very gently, you can go ahead and see how it's creating the lines on the paper where the texture of the object is. So you're going to go ahead and keep filling your paper as much as you want. For this particular section. Now I'm going to want this circle to be yellow as well. So for the colors, I'm going to go ahead and use a green. I'm choosing a lighter green just so that it's nice and noticeable. I'm going all the way out to the edge of the shape. And you can change how you're coloring. The trick is to make sure that your template, whatever surface you're using, is not moving. Now, for a space like this, where you have an issue that you've already colored into this space, you can go ahead and start coloring in the space with a darker color. And as long as the color that you were using was the main primary here, it's not really going to affect the overall color other than a little bit of darkening. And it's going to just kind of blend it in. Now obviously you can attempt to erase that area, but as long as you use a slightly darker color, it shouldn't make that much of a difference and it shouldn't be overly noticeable. Now, for the next part, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to fill the rest of the paper using your assortment of textures. Now, let's say you already have your texture. You have everything set up, everything's good. So now the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go in and add a series of patterns. So I'm going to go ahead and just do polka dots because I happen to really like polka dots. But you can do any sort of pattern that you want. Checkers, stripes, zigzags, however you want to do your pattern. So you're going to make sure to fill this background area using a pattern. And make sure that you're using a marker to trace the outside edge of all of your shapes. Once you have filled your paper with the pattern, you're going to go ahead and add a texture to color the rest of the paper. Now, for this one, since I had this one primary and these overlapped areas secondary, the outside area can be whatever color you want. It can be tints or shades of another color. If you want to use pink, or if you want to use brown or black, that's up to you. But you want to make sure that you're using a combination of marker and colored pencil to create the background of your art piece. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a texture for the outside edge, but I would like for you to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to this lighter, brighter blue for this outside area. Now, when I'm coloring it in, you want to go ahead and make sure that you have a texture, any texture is fine, underneath the paper, and you're filling it in over the top of the marker. That way, you're filling it completely. You're not leaving any space that's open on your paper. You don't want any empty space on your project, on the final project. Now you can mix and match and overlap as you see fit for this outside edge. You don't have to trace the specific texture. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this little section. And then scooch this over and switch to another color. So I'm going to switch to a brighter green this time. And you want to do that as you continue moving onward. Now, like I said, I'm going to be continuing using the same texture, and I'm just going to switch from color to color as I'm going around, and you can use whatever colors you'd like. Rainbows, pinks, whatever color. Now, once you have finished your project, please make sure your name and class period is on it before you turn it in the lower right-hand corner. So that's going to be this corner right here. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and do that because I'm not turning this in until anybody. But again, please make sure that you're finishing your entire project, and once you have finished it, you should have a very interesting and visually dynamic art piece. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.